Program and Operations Supervisor with the City of Richmond Office of Sustainability. I've been co-facilitating this working group since the beginning, along with Wendy Fuster, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Wendy Fuster, the Climate Action Coordinator in the Office of Sustainability. And like Dawn said, been working on this together for a while now.
Thanks, Wendy. How about David?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you again. My name is David. I'm a student at VCU doing my master's in environmental science and helping out Dawn and Wendy with this group for a while as well. So good to see everyone again.
Thanks, David. Hey, Angela.
Hello, I'm Angela Fontaine. I am a roundtable member.
Thank you. Very important. Glad you're here. And Barbara?
Hello, I'm Barbara J. Cox, and I'm from Plan RVA.
Thanks, Barbara. Jeff Crawford, one of our co-chairs. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Jeff Crawford. I'm a management analyst with the Finance Department, Finance and Administration portfolio for the city.
Thanks. And Alex?
Hi, this is Alex Dandridge. I'm a planner with the City of Richmond Planning Department and secretary to the Urban Design Committee.
Excellent. Thank you. Diane?
Diane Linderman. I'm a consultant with VHB here in Richmond, and work with the Office of Sustainability and have a history in public works.
Excellent. Thank you. Jason?
I just had to unmute myself, sorry. For some reason, my camera isn't working. There's an update or something that I need to do at some point, so I apologize for that. But I'm Jason James. I am mainly involved in transportation, especially so-called alternative transportation stuff in Richmond, and I teach at the University of Mary Washington.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Trisha?
Good afternoon. My name is Trisha Robinson. I am the acting planning manager of GRTC.
Wonderful. We have a great group here today. Did I miss anybody?
This is Sandra Antoine, joining from the Community Outreach Leadership.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. So we have a couple of phone numbers, and when you're on the phone, you can't put in your name. So when we do go into the breakouts, we'll just have to pay attention to that. But thank you for being here. I'm really grateful for those of you who are able to make it. This meeting is being recorded so that we can share it with the folks who couldn't join us today. We do have a nice large transportation working group, but lots of busy movers and shakers. So it's tough to get everyone together at the same time. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can launch the presentation. You should have received an email from me a couple days ago that had some links in it. So the Google slide deck was in that email. It's also in the chat right now if you're able to access that. If you'd like to follow along, otherwise I'll be sharing my screen. So the very first slide has links to it. If you are live in the Google slide deck, you can click on those links to get at the different documents that we'll be talking about. The Q&A slide is for those of you who are using Teams, city staff who can't access the chat feature. You can put your Q&A in here. This is something that our team will go back and review after the meeting and revisit any questions, or if you want to share resources with each other, this is the place to do it, an interactive screen, since we're not able to meet in person just yet. But I'll go ahead and kick off this presentation. So today we are moving further into development of our strategies. Excuse me, this is equitable implementation and accountability. So I will hand it over to Wendy to introduce the agenda and objectives.
Okay, for today, we're going to do some settling in and ground rules. We did our introductions already, and we'll cover the ground rules next. We'll do a quick review, a little update on how we're using the impact maps that we did at our last meeting. We'll go over some key concepts on equitable implementation. So what does that entail and what needs to go into our implementation framework? Then we'll have our activity, which will be most of the meeting today, which is defining the implementation readiness, the partners, next steps, and funding mechanisms. And Dawn will be going over all of that. And then we'll have our conclusion, wrap up, and next steps. So the objectives for today are to start building out our equitable implementation and accountability framework for each of the strategies we've developed. So we'll cover the readiness of that strategy, equitable next steps, implementation partners, and funding and financing. And not every strategy will have something in each of those categories, but we'll just cover those. And we'll be going through an example together too in a little bit. And our ground rules, again, respect each other, be present, everyone participate, no one dominates. So we really want to get inputs from everybody here. Everybody has a different, expertise or niche that they're an expert in, and that's why you're in the group. And so we really want to hear everyone's voice. Even if you don't think you're an expert in a certain area, you certainly have your lived experience that you can share with us. So do that. Be additive and not repetitive. We're going to aim for consensus, be open to new ideas, bring solutions to our problems, separate people from problems, speak from your own experience, give a thumbs up or whatever if you agree with things. And then if we've got some silence for a while, we'll just say, or too much talk on one topic, we'll just say that's enough, let's move on and make space for everyone. There you go. You're muted, Dawn.
Thanks. Sorry, just wanted to make a quick correction here. So I'm sharing and then I'll share again. So regarding those ground rules, I want to just remind you, I know we go over them every time, but the reason we do that is because we really do want to make sure that that everyone understands that this working group is every single person here is adding to the plan and process. This isn't a one-sided plan. This is really, it's really important. Every single person is bringing a certain perspective, like Wendy said, a certain level of expertise, a certain background experience. And if this was going to be the kind of plan that city staff was just going to develop and put out and ask for comments, that's a traditional way of doing things. But we're really from the start doing it the hard way and making sure that every step along the way is community owned and equity centered. So sometimes I know it feels a little, some of the activities might be a little grueling. We're trying to pull out information, but please know that your valuable time is cherished, and we're really grateful for your inputs, and that's what's going to make this plan so much better in the end. So thank you for bearing with us and always adding your input and giving us suggestions to continually improve. This is a learning journey for all of us, and this is brand new. The way we're doing this is brand new to us. As far as we know, the city of Richmond hasn't even done it this way 100% before. So we're really grateful for your patience and participation. But we've made it a long way in this journey. This is a 2-year process, and we are in our final months of plan development. So we're all the way into the creating implementation framework and metrics. And just to show you how far we've come all the way down our plan development, just this summer, we jumped through the prioritizing strategies. We went through the impact mapping to really understand, pull out those actionable outputs and outcomes, and identify the impacts to make sure that the strategies were impacting the community priorities and centering equity. And that's what's going to lead into the indicators conversation we'll be having at the end of the summer. But today we're going into implementation. So this is how are we going to equitably implement, measure progress, and ensure accountability in this plan. So just to show you a little more specifically what we did between the last meeting and this meeting, we went through those impact maps. I know that was, everyone thinks differently. So it might have been fun and interesting for some and not so fun and interesting for others. But I do want you to know that what we ended up with was really, really helpful. And so our staff went through all of those maps. We pulled out all of the outputs and outcomes in order to make today's activity even more meaningful. And then all of those impacts from the maps were sorted and refined and added and measured, and we have some really good ideas of what needs to be measured to make sure that the plan, we have accountability and transparency built into every strategy. But now we're going to move on into the equitable implementation and accountability framework. So there are a lot of elements of this part of the plan. We are going to be going through the implementation elements today, including the ones in green. So readiness, funding and financing mechanisms, equitable next steps, implementation partners, and then city staff or our office will work with other departments to understand the city steward piece. So the ones that are kind of grayed out are the ones that we'll figure out internally as best as we can, but we really want your input on the others to get us going in the right direction. The ones in blue are the accountability piece that we'll be going over in August. So transparency, external accountability, and from that we'll be kind of reporting back on indicators, costs, and timelines as best as we see fit. Again, all of this is going to be very ongoing engagement, iterative, back and forth, so that we can make sure that what is presented to City Council is very strong and is we've really thought about all of the components that need to be thought out. But today, equitable implementation. Let's start here. So first of all, the concept of readiness. What that means is when it comes to these strategies, what activities are already occurring and what might be needed to get this strategy off the ground. And I'll go into that in a little more depth, but it's basically what's the status of the strategy. Some pieces of our strategies are already happening, but we've got a different lens on them that's making them focused on greenhouse gas reductions and resiliency and equity to make them stronger. So we want to kind of know what the status is on these in terms of readiness. Equitable next steps are what immediate next steps can we identify to roll this strategy out. We're not developing an entire implementation plan for every single strategy. We're coming up with the first next steps so that we can make sure that these strategies are on the road to success. Implementation partners, that's what other departments or community organizations or private entities could potentially assist with implementation. This is not, we are not assigning work to anybody here. This is just a brainstorm. All of this is a brainstorming session to make sure that we're inviting all the right folks to the table who should be considered. And then the funding and financing, that is, what does financing look for this type of strategy? A lot of that is going to end up, with city budget, trying to figure out what can be paid for, but a lot of it won't be, and we need to come up with, or it can't be. And so we're going to have to think about some creative ways to get these strategies funded. So like I said, the city steward is the city department that is or will be responsible for overseeing the implementation of each of the strategies. But those are the different components that we're going over today. In terms of the strategy itself and how we are going to be discussing those elements, as you'll remember, a couple meetings ago, back in May, when we were prioritizing the strategies, we recognized that while we could let some go, there were others that made sense to roll up under an overarching theme. So that overarching theme is the strategy. In this example, we have municipal fleet electrification. So that strategy says, electrify Richmond's fleet of vehicles and equipment in alignment with the Clean and Green Fleet Report. The subcomponents that were rolled up under there are strategies that you identified that could roll up under there, or maybe there's language in the strategy that could kind of be pulled out so we can make it more actionable, or maybe during the impact mapping activity, you identified some specific outputs that came straight out of that strategy that we could focus on. So this is really, like I said, the subcomponents are what allowing these strategies to be actionable and broken down into those component parts that can be thought through a little more strategically. Anyone have any questions on that before I move on? Okay. All right, so the readiness conversation. This is a pretty easy one. This is where we're looking at the status. Like I said, is it ongoing, already underway? Is it ready to go? Maybe it's all the pieces are there. Nothing's holding it up from starting except for prioritizing it and maybe getting staff or resources together. But otherwise, it's ready to go. Is it aligned for implementation? And so that is, the intention is not to duplicate the work. It's really to integrate and align these strategies with other plans that are already in the go, have already been approved, by identifying those gaps in the other plans and processes where we can focus on climate mitigation and resilience. But we do want to recognize if there's alignment with another plan, if you're aware of something else. We have no one person in these working groups has all the answers. So each of us knows a little bit of what's going to go into this brainstorming activity. We want to gather it all here. In terms of requiring city action, this is maybe the strategy can't move forward until we have a policy change or some kind of ordinance or zoning or administrative regulation. Something needs to be approved before we can move forward on the city side. And then requires state action is just what it says, that the policy changes at the state level are needed for this strategy to move forward. And we certainly need to recognize if that's a barrier to moving forward. Everyone understand readiness? Clear as a...
John, I have a question. And I don't know, maybe this will come out, but is there any consideration of the market being ready?
Well,
like I'm thinking about electric vehicles. Are there enough vehicles out in the marketplace and vehicle types that that if we even if we had a strategy, we couldn't implement because of the market?
That's a great point. So this bullet, if not what is missing, that would be a good example of what might be missing. And I think if we had to pick one, maybe that would be ready to go. But in the next steps, we would have to recognize that, waiting for that market for whatever it is, that's gonna be part of the next steps.
Okay.
I believe we had another question in the chat. Can someone see that?
Yeah, it says, it's from Terry. Do all these steps assume funding is secured and ready to be spent?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We'll get to that. But yes, there is no assumption that any funds are available for any of these things. Okay, so that's readiness. The equitable next steps. This is, the goal is equitable implementation. So we want to take the time to review the equity screening tool. If you have that link, it's also in the chat. It was in the email the other day. It's a Google Doc. This was what we helped to develop last winter, and it's a great tool. This is the time to pull it out and revisit it. It asks some really good questions about burdens and education and making sure that we are thinking through from the community priority perspective. So please have that on hand if you can to help with the activity, the breakout activity. But what we'll be doing is thinking about what are 1 to 3 key next steps so we can get this strategy off the ground. And then we'll identify what are the major equity gaps or disparities that this strategy could address. It's easy to think about, these are the steps we want to take to get it done. But when you stop and think, just like we've been doing all along, okay, but what equity gap could this strategy help with? And then once you identify what those gaps are, we want to think about, and then how can we equitably prioritize the rollout of this strategy? So I know it feels maybe repetitive, but we do have to keep pulling that back in because that's what's centering equity in our implementation. Any questions about that? Okay, so the next one is implementation partners. This is where we're identifying potential stakeholders. It's just a brainstorm about others we should connect with. It is not a published document assigning responsibility. It's really just a starting point. Who needs to be involved in the implementation, or who should be invited to be involved in the implementation in order for it to be successful? Like I said, it's just a brainstorm of potential inclusion. It is no way tapping people for involvement, just the beginning of our implementation journey, so that no one is being assigned, and we're just trying to be inclusive, make sure that we're brainstorming partners, but we aren't making decisions about who's in charge at this point. So think about who's essential to the decision-making process. Certainly they should be considered. And also be thinking about who could benefit from the success of this activity. We might find some additional resources when we recognize those code benefits. And then, of course, we want to include the members of our frontline communities that have been underrepresented or historically excluded from the planning process in the past. We're trying to correct those wrongs through this new process. So those are the different implementation partners, and we go through the activity to get you thinking. We'll go through, what city departments, what community organizations or agencies, what private sector organizations might we want to list. How about equity partners? If we haven't already identified equity partners specifically, who could we include to make sure that equity is centered in these strategies? All right, and then the piece on funding and financing. This is a tool that other cities have used. It's called a funding and financing pathways map. And it's just a really, it's a great tool, a visual communication tool that shows the different pathways available for each of these strategies. It helps us to collaborate with other internal and external partners. It's easy to understand, and it can help secure political support. The funding and financing piece is essential. And if we can put this together in a way that is easily communicating some different options, it'll get us further faster. So these are just a couple of examples for a couple of our strategies. So if we look at fleet electrification, well, what are some of the types of funding sources? Maybe some grants, federal or state grants, maybe some special lease purchase agreements, municipal or green bonds. Maybe it's a group asset purchasing through city budget. Some of the resources or partners that were identified are listed under there, and then we're looking for examples of other successful plans or cities and plans and programs that we can look to as a resource of best practice. So that's what those maps look like, and it is complicated. We're not asking you to do it. What we're doing today is brainstorming just kind of your thoughts. If you are aware of any examples, we want to capture that here. But if you are interested in helping us, we are looking for volunteers, and this will be our office will be working on this through the end of the year. So if this is the kind of work you like and you have a little bit of time, it doesn't need to be a major time commitment, but if it's something you want to help us with, we would love to have the extra help. So for us to be able to put that together, what we're going to be asking you today are, what are some creative funding and financing mechanisms that can help pay for the strategy implementation? So climate action plans are, the transition to a net zero resilient Richmond cannot be funded entirely by local property taxpayers. we really need to identify the creative and innovative approaches and strategic investments by both public and private sectors. So staff can identify whether it's capital intensive or programmatic. If it's programmatic, it mostly means staff or a policy change or prioritized responsibilities. But if it's capital intensive, then we really need to look to these different monetary sources. So grants or partnerships, loans, bonds, budget, taxes, fees, any special financing arrangements. So we'll want to ask if it's supported by municipal budgeting, how, if you know, and you have some expertise or experience or even just suggestions, go ahead and speak up. When we get to what grants, partnerships, or other funding sources are you aware of, this doesn't mean that you've vetted it and you know for sure that it's a done deal. It just means it's something we might want to look into because you heard about this one or that one. When we ask you, are there any existing local programs that could be aligned with or expanded? Again, maybe there's a program going on in some kind of neighborhood or nonprofit organization or regional partnership that we could align with. And then what are some examples of other similar successful funding stories? We'd love to capture those case studies so we can learn from them. So, we're always looking, as you know, to all the other cities out there doing these things and taking best practices, but Richmond's unique. Every city is unique. And so we need to look to them as examples, but focus on what's available to us locally. And you guys are the best resource for that when it comes to our transportation options. So any questions about that? All right, I'm going to introduce this activity and show you what it's a spreadsheet. We're going to split into 3 groups and we're going to walk through the strategies together. But first, I want to go back over those components. So we're going to have about an hour and 10-15 minutes to go through, actually not that much, something like that, hour and 10-15 minutes to go through as many as we can get through. We don't need to fill out every single box. It's not a fill in the box guessing game. It's a what do you have to contribute? We would love to hear your thoughts. And then, like I said, the first component we're going to walk through is the readiness. Are these activities already occurring? What is the general readiness of the subcomponents? What are the key next steps for getting the strategy off the ground? Who can assist with implementing to help carry out those next steps? And then what does financing look like? Are you aware of any specific sources of funds? So we're going to do an example together. Let me show you what it looks like. I can make this bigger. So this first strategy is transportation demand management. It says support commute alternatives for city employees through a transportation demand management framework. The 2 subcomponents for that strategy are support employee commute alternatives such as transit and bicycle storage facilities, shower facilities, optimized vehicle routing, and telecommuting. And then the other one is enforce an anti-idling policy among city employee drivers. In this column C, you can see some notes and comments that we brought along from previous working groups, from the community engagement period, and from the impact maps that we didn't want to lose, because some of these are important to consider in the next steps. So there may be some pieces of this that could go directly into the next 1, 2, or 3 next steps. If there's relevant legislation that we know about, we would have populated it in that column I. If you know of something, please call it out and we'll make sure to put it there as well. But the first question I have for you is, what do you think the readiness status is of this? Do you believe that supporting employee commute alternatives is ongoing? I think it is. I'm not sure.
And I just want to point out real quick, guys, that a readiness status, just because it's ongoing, doesn't mean another part might not need city action. So there can be multiple answers for each one.
Thank you, Jeff. Perfect. Yep. So is this ongoing? I believe so. It just needs help, right? Okay. So I'm going to put an X here. And then in terms of what are 1 to 3 key next steps, so is it, I mean, obviously first we need to assess what is going on already in those areas. Any suggestions for what are the key next steps? Anyone from transportation or?
I would say like you did, kind of just assessing what's already available. Do we have bicycle storage facilities? Do we have shower facilities? Do we have, vehicle routing, things like that? Just take an inventory, basically, and a needs assessment.
And I might be jumping ahead, but I assume the city has a robust telework strategy established from this past year. And so, locking that down or building on that or embracing that. And then there's also Telework Virginia, which I'll drop into the chat as a resource.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so clarify telework policy and promote. And maybe some kind of a survey of needs and maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think a survey of needs, this is Jason, by the way, and maybe also what incentives might lead someone to take advantage of other means of commuting.
Excellent.
And Dawn, with regards to what Wendy mentioned about the site assessment, it may be worth making that like a living document. You could grade your facilities on if they have bike storage facilities, if they have shower facilities. And another component is that it's very difficult to add showers within the building code to existing facilities. And so having some patience or supporting that department and helping achieve that.
Yeah, that's great. Needs assessment and
maybe it's relaxing the dress code.
And that sounds, the building regulations you speak to, that sounds like it might take some city or even state action to overcome. So we might want to include that in the readiness status.
okay. City
so
action.
that might be, and I don't know what this is, but I'm just going to say that adding a bicycle shower is regulated by the same ADA guidance for a handicap shower. And so even though it's a very different piece of technology, it's like a 4-foot shower. So that's where the logistics come in. And that you're right that it may be a state changes.
Okay, this is fantastic. Great feedback. So what are
this?
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. This is Carrie with GRTC. I think when you were giving the introduction, one of the reasons why this was ongoing and may need some assistance is staff time. So maybe this is that we are underutilizing already available entities that this is all they do, like Ride Finders. This is what Ride Finders does, is they do ride matching, van pooling, carpooling, teleworking, supporting transit. So that's an entire team of experts that this is all they do, that maybe we are disconnected in using that resource to its fullest capability.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so those are 3 great key next steps. What are any major equity gaps or disparities that this strategy could address when it comes to employee commutes?
This is Carrie at GRTC again. I mean, the obvious one that we've all experienced during COVID is that not every position is telework capable or work flex capable. So that is already a baked in inherent inequity.
Okay, so then can you think of a way to equitably prioritize the rollout of this strategy, considering that not every position is telework capable?
I think if I knew that answer, I'd be a bazillionaire by now.
I think a part of that is inventorying. We say, okay, well, we can't do that teleworking because we haven't done it that way. But the real question is, do we have a full inventory of what we've learned from COVID, like how to share documents on Teams, how to do work processes in a modern way, as opposed to paper forms to do things and stuff of that nature. I think that adds equity to creating more mobile workforce, and the less mobile workforce that gets to work from home more often.
I wonder if that would require some state actions on like public meeting. I don't know, just was thinking about FOIA stuff and how all that's handled. Yeah.
Diana, as a FOIA officer, you are 1,000% correct.
Okay, so there are probably some even better ideas that you guys will think about later, and we definitely want to capture those as well. But as an example, I want to walk across to who needs to be involved in the implementation of this strategy for it to be successful. And who, city departments, community organizations, private sector equity partners. Thank you for those of you who are in here typing things in. That's very helpful. Any other thoughts?
Under city departments, I think you would have to have HR and DPW.
Yep. HR, DPW,
planning, PDR.
Yep. PDR, and then I was thinking CIP engineers, if we're making this a checklist item on new buildings or major retrofits, then they need to be involved.
They're not DPW?
They are.
Okay.
DPW, well, yeah, so I guess I'm just thinking DPW, specifically the CIP project managers.
Yep.
Okay, and then how about anyone else considering equity?
Well, GRTC.
Okay. Yep, GRTC. Okay, and then moving on to the funding and financing. Any thoughts here?
American Rescue Plan Act money.
I guess we'll see how the rules come out. Huh?
The rules are out and they are being hotly debated as to what we can use it on and what we cannot.
I didn't think they were final. I thought they were interim.
GFOA has guidance. It is ever evolving.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what this looks like. What we're going to do is go into the activity groups. Before we do that, any questions on what we just did? Okay, so I'm going to have objective 1 talking about the achieve climate neutrality in the municipal fleet operations and increase resilience and stewardship of our transportation infrastructure. Wendy is going to lead the conversation on objective 2, which is create vibrant neighborhoods where all residents can easily ride transit, walk, or bike to meet daily needs in alignment with Richmond Connects. And then David is going to facilitate objective 3, and that one is transition the community rapidly and equitably to clean fuel vehicles and transit. So if you have access to the Google Slides and you want to type your name in under there, that's great. If you don't have access and you want to call it out, Wendy or David will put your name in there, and I'm going to go into the breakouts and start assigning them. We will come back, take a 5-minute break, and when you come back, we'll send you into your rooms, and then we'll have about an hour or so in those rooms to get through as many as we can. Really appreciate your full participation, and I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah, just shout it out if you have a preference and aren't able to type it in there. We'll get you in one.
This is Alex. I think I tried to type my name into objective 2, but I'm not seeing it pop up.
Okay, no, I don't see it either. So let me get in there.
Oh, I think there it is. It popped up.
Oh, okay, I see it up there too. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. But he's going in my group for a change. And I'm thinking, why don't I have objective 3? That's probably more my speed.
Yeah, this is Barbara. I can't type it into, I wanted objective 2 as well. Unfortunately, we're all going there, right?
Yeah, we might need to spread people out a little bit.
Yeah, I really can't speak to the other 2 very well, so
Okay.
about the municipal fleet.
And I have to go grab my drink, which I left in the kitchen. I will be right back.
So then, Diane, I see your second choice, I think was 1. Can we move you to group 1? And then keep Barbara with the group 2. Does that work?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I have the room set up. So it always takes a minute to load the rooms, but I'm going to go ahead and get those opened. If you want to come back into the main room, which is where I'll be, just in the top right corner, you're going to click on return to main room. Just don't click the red leave button because that'll close you out of the whole meeting. But we will come back at 2:50 to wrap up, and thank you again for giving us your valuable input here. I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms, and we'll see you there. All right, so we have Jeff and Diane and Sandra. I know you wanted to try to go to room or the third objective. I tried to send you there. Let me try one more time. Yeah, for some reason, I don't know if it means that you're on a different browser, but it's just not, it says that you can't send you. So, Sandra, we're going to be talking about Objective 1, and I know if you have specific input you want to add to Objective 3, then we can do that. We can schedule that another time, or you can, call us and walk through your ideas. I don't want to take that opportunity away from you, but I think that with this technology, it doesn't look like I'm able to send you for some reason. Can you hear me? Maybe it's her phone. Maybe
she might be calling in on a phone, possibly.
Yeah, so maybe her phone went.
Maybe she went. Yeah, maybe she went.
All right. Well, let's see what we can accomplish here. So that second subcomponent for this first strategy, enforce an anti-idling policy among city employee drivers. I think we already have one, right?
I'm looking at it right now, dated 2011.
Okay, so let's say.
Can you, I don't know enough of it. Can you put an automatic shut off in a vehicle? Like 30 seconds or something?
Not with the age of our fleet, I don't think.
Yeah.
I've
never heard of it. I'm just curious. You would think.
I bet there's something. I bet there's something. All right.
I think on the newer cars, you can almost like the insurance companies will give you that little thing that you plug in, and it monitors the data. I wonder if there's a technological so fleet manager can get notified. Hey, car 207 spends 20 minutes idling up, when the policy is that you can only spend 10 minutes idling up if it's freezing or below.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there is a technological solution there.
Yeah, I'm just realizing that our fleet superintendent left.
Oh.
He would be good.
I noticed that too.
He would be good to have in this conversation. Oh well. All right. So any equity gaps that could be identified with anti-idling?
Yeah, I don't know.
Diane, what do you think? I can't think of anything for that.
I can't either. Yeah.
Okay. How about city departments or?
It's gonna be all of them that own vehicles, right?
Yeah, technically, I think only fleet owns the vehicle.
Yeah, no, I realize about But
yeah.
Whoever leases the vehicles then from fleet.
Exactly.
Those are the ones that have to enforce the policy.
Well, and that's
and the policy is a citywide policy, not a DPW policy.
Correct. It's part of the admin regs.
Okay.
So every employee signs off acknowledging that they have read and will abide by.
Yeah.
Enforcement is key, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So
I think this is the one we need a stick versus a carrot.
yeah.
And Diane, that's a really good point. I think it would be a lot more effective if instead of, writing people up, you're like, hey, we're going to do something for the department that has the least idling time per.
Then you have to measure it. And that's how, I don't know how you measure it.
Darren, it looks like
they reduce their gas consumption by a certain amount or something. I don't know.
Darren, can you hear me? I wonder if he's having trouble. Well, it says that you're unmuted, but I don't hear you. But we're grateful that you're here because this is the group talking about municipal fleet and anti-idling policies and what we would need to do as next steps. So I don't know if you can hear me.
It looks like he's not on mute.
I know. We can't hear him though, if he is talking. Maybe you could take your camera, turn your camera on and give us thumbs up.
He might be a floating head as well.
Yeah, we have another one too. So, all right. Well, we would love for you to add your knowledge to this conversation if you can join us. But understand the technology is.
Hopefully they're in two places at once and they're participating in another working group. That's what I hope and pray.
No, I love these new perspectives. I wish I could capture them. So departments, all departments that own vehicles, and how about this is really a programmatic thing. There's not any funding unless we were to get that technology that like has the auto shut off or something, but that's really budgeting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that I don't even know if that would be capital in the sense of, it's not a tangible asset. You know what I mean? It's a small thing that really takes staff time to monitor. Like the physical cost isn't
exactly
the bulk of it.
In the scheme of things, yeah. Actually, well, I guess the implementation step would be that you make it a part of all your new purchases. Yeah. And we're all assuming that there's something exists, but.
So that's a good point. We should incorporate monitoring.
I have a friend who works for UPS as a delivery driver, and they can tell him when he's been idling for like a minute, literally. So there has to be.
I have to think so.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Well, let's jump to the next strategy. This is municipal connectivity and complete streets. Steward the city's Better Streets policy and prioritize connections between neighborhoods that are walking and mobility friendly. So the two subcomponents are promote stewardship of the city's Better Streets policy between neighborhoods and connect areas and green spaces in order to promote walkability and continuity for all modes of transportation.
Did you just see that note from?
Yeah, what did that say?
So dropped off and attempted to rejoin, hopefully allowing you to hear me, but still having issues.
Hi, Sandra. Well, we can see your chat, but you're on mute. Yeah, it doesn't give me an option to unmute you. Wish I could hear you.
Sandra, if you got it top right little microphone, but I'm sure you're unfortunately muted.
Bummer. I really wish we could just do this in person. Okay, so
I'm allowed to have in-person meetings now?
Well, I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
We are allowed to. I still wear my mask even though they say we don't have to, but you know.
Yeah, well, that's personal.
I haven't heard about like public meetings, like city council, they're all still doing it remotely, right?
Dawn and I could have an in-person meeting, no problem.
Yeah, I'm surprised because the state requires all their public meetings now to be in person.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, we continued our emergency pronouncement beyond that of the states because we need to so that council can do their meetings digitally is my understanding.
Well,
so that's a city choice now versus a state mandate.
Right.
Okay. Well, Sandra, I'm really sorry. I wish that I could accommodate you somehow. Certainly continue to type in the chat and we'll keep an eye on that. Same with Darren. I see both of your names at the top, but we can't hear you or see you. So
Sandra, there's also a call-in number on the invite if you want to try calling in on your phone. I hate computers.
All right. Well, we are trying to
keep trucking
here. So let's see. The two subcomponents promote stewardship of the Better Streets policy between neighborhoods and connect areas and green spaces to promote walkability and continuity for all modes of transportation. There are a couple of notes here. Someone said, make sure this connects to Richmond 300 nodes and fix sidewalks that make walking and biking dangerous. And from the impact mapping last month, it was spelled out to expand micro-mobility infrastructure and capacity to make transit usage more convenient and reduce demand for parking. So what do you think about readiness of these two?
I think the first one is ongoing.
Okay.
Because this policy exists.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't require anybody but you guys to.
And I think a lot of our development deals, like when we sell the public works building, we have riders on there that say that it needs to reestablish connectivity of clay or whatever, you know, so we are
in the public safety building. Yes.
Yeah, we're actively trying to recreate that connective network. And that aligns, yes, like with Richmond 300, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything that we need to do from a legislative standpoint for the city and state? Do you think?
No. I think council years ago passed the complete streets policy requirement. So council's taken an action to support it. So, and you now have the document, which we did. I think it's just a matter of education and requiring anything happening to use it as a guidance, as a, you know, have to use it.
And I know Richmond 300 has all kinds of analysis of where connectivity is lacking or could be enhanced. So I think we have a to-do list, so to speak.
Sure. You know, and but most of it really is about, you know, what does the street section look like? How does it better support pedestrian activity? You know, or where it has 7 different typologies, like an industrial area. You don't necessarily need really wide sidewalks, right?
Right.
Or bike lanes, but in a downtown, you know, you do. So it's you know, it's really just enforcing the use, I guess.
Right. This one makes me think of a very specific section of sidewalk in our city at the dollar store or Dollar General on Broadway near Lowe's, where the setback of the building on the side is literally 8 inches. There is no sidewalk.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think we have those identified.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the next step could be, Jeff, is to do that inventory, right? Is to know where there are locations that don't, or, you know, high either high use areas like high pedestrian transit zones, et cetera, that don't have the adequate infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. And then you can just do that by overlaying traffic, traffic pedestrian accidents or bike accidents.
Yeah.
It'll give you some insight into
Yeah,
that.
that'll give you some data for sure. But some of it you'll know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like there's, unfortunately, you don't have pedestrian data anywhere very much.
Right. But if
But
you ask each council
VCU
member,
or something, yeah. Oh, yeah. Or if you do know the GRTC routes, and so that last mile, those last mile connections are certainly ones. We listed that as an overlay. We listed school zones as overlay, so making sure that sidewalks in the vicinity of schools are adequate.
okay. So what's after we've identified it's the action?
Money.
So, okay, the policy exists.
Invest in America money.
Well, it's infrastructure.
Yeah.
The equity gap, so between neighborhoods, how do we equitably roll out once we identify the conditions and the uses?
Which I guess is really the second one.
Well, I'm still on this promote stewardship of the city's better streets policy between neighborhoods. How do we equitably roll that out?
I guess I lost track of the between neighborhoods. Well, I mean, there could be an inventory done too of, it's going to be mostly on the south side, right? Where neighborhoods were built sort of independent of each other. Mm-hmm. Whereas the grid systems on the north side are certainly allow for far more connectivity.
I'd push back a little bit because in certain areas of Church Hill, I think we have places where if you look at it on a satellite, you go, yeah, we have a great grid of connected sidewalks here. But if you look at differently abled users, there's literally no point to having those sidewalks because every half of a block is a ramp that kids are using for bike jumps. So I think that's certainly a challenge in my neighborhood.
Sure.
Where even pushing the stroller, I don't use the sidewalks because too many wheelies.
That's not necessarily a connectivity issue, it's an infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, what partners could you identify to be involved in this?
Well, it certainly is planning in DPW.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess
I'd also put citizen service response and risk management, because citizen services and response has information about people making specific site-oriented complaints, and risk management has all of the data on where is our lack of sidewalk infrastructure literally costing us money from settlements and things of that nature.
Yep.
How about community organizations?
So, I'm sorry. Should you list like the mayor's office? I mean, I don't know, that's a city department, but I mean, there's like the council and planning commission and the mayor's office all, I think, have a role, don't they? Oh, and Parks too, yeah.
Thanks, Sandra. Darren, I think you're in the same boat as Sandra. I tried sending you to one of the other breakouts to see if they could hear you, and I saw you come back. But if you want to type in the chat, although you're city staff, so you
Sandra's right. Parks and Rec, because a lot of our stuff comes, a lot of transportation on sidewalk surfaces might be through a city-owned property, a park or something of that nature. So that's definitely one we want to add.
Exactly.
So Darren, if you can't access the chat, if you go to the presentation and use this Q&A slide, number 2, you can type stuff there.
And I've got multiple screens, so I can keep an eye on that.
Okay, thanks. All right, so community organizations that should be involved in this. I'm still looking at this promote stewardship. You know, that kind of spreads the love, right? Like, how do we promote
Yep.
stewardship?
Sports backers come to mind, although I'm not quite sure about it, but should list them. I mean, they're in the community promoting using of the infrastructure.
Yep, civic associations.
And I
nice.
think there's a lot of cleanup organizations, like neighborhood beautification is a beautiful, ugly word. You know what I mean? It's a loaded word, but I think that there's neighborhood organizations oriented towards this kind of thing.
Great idea.
What is there still a Clean City Commission? And what is there a green? What is it? Are there any of those?
Yeah, the Clean City Commission. Mm-hmm. Equity partners. Can you think of any equity partners? Groundwork, RVA.
And I think RRHA would be possibly included in there because they deal with communities who probably rely more on public transit and walking and having complete streets versus car-oriented.
Yeah, great idea.
You know, auto families.
Okay. How about funding and financing? Any thoughts there?
Real quick for private sector, I think if we're talking about complete streets, I think that especially coming out of COVID, there are a lot of restaurants and private folks who, if we had bigger setbacks and we had better sidewalks, we could have alfresco dining with more normalcy and drive revenue for them. So I think they'd be interested in a stronger sidewalk city generally.
I think I would put developers too.
That's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great ideas. Any funding and financing thoughts?
It's the way it's written, promotes stewardship.
Yeah.
Is definitely programmatic. But when it comes to laying concrete and getting street trees and making sure we have safe pedestrian crossings, that's very much a capital intensive.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's the second subcomponent, the connect areas and green spaces.
Okay, great.
I like that.
So, yeah, so I don't think it's capital intensive. There's an effort. That's just time and.
Right. Okay. All right.
To analyze where those improvements need to be made, right? It's almost a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the second one, connect areas and green spaces in order to promote walkability and continuity for all modes of transportation. Expand micromobility infrastructure and capacity to make transit usage more convenient and reduce demand for parking. Readiness status. Ready to go? Aligned?
Yeah, I think you're probably in the ready to go. I bet there's some things ongoing, but it's probably worth just saying it needs to start.
Any city action? I don't think so. I think this is pretty, Richmond 300's all over that, right?
Yeah. And I know that there's like, if you think of micromobility to include bike sharing, things like that, there's expansion plans to like non-traditional locations that aren't governed by the dollar sign as opposed to trying to enhance mobility. So ready to go in a line sounds good.
How about next steps?
It kind of builds on what you've done, the steps you did in like that step 2, right? Where you've identified the gaps and then you've got to prioritize them. and be creative about what's required.
Right.
Same
It's
as
putting it into CIP projects. That's the translation.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think for some of these, I have with some of the potential revenue streams we have coming into the city associated with the Urban One casino development, which is not money we're counting yet 1,000% because we don't know, but it is going in a underfunded area.
Yep.
Historically when it comes to connectivity. And this is citizen Jeff, not city employee Jeff, saying that I think it would be unfair to redistribute that money when the area surrounding it could use so much. Like when you said Southside has connectivity issues, well, there's a new revenue stream that could really be good.
Well, you guys are in a good position funding wise. I mean, you have lots of expenses. I get that, but you have the CVTA money now that you didn't used to have.
I would point out that those CVTA dollars those previous gas consumptions were based on an old world. But yes, I'm
new money
with you.
Regardless of the fact of what, not
exactly.
The numbers, not what you hope they were. It's still new.
Exactly.
ARA money, or the ARP money, and the invest in. There's going to be an invest in America or invest in whatever it is in money. I mean, the ARA money. I don't know how you're going to spend $150 million. I'm sure you'll figure it out, but I just, I've obviously done some research into it, and there's things like around stormwater and stuff, which you would think that if you could do stormwater work and happen to add a connected sidewalk,
exactly,
as part of the project,
a riverfront trail on top of that large catchment.
That's right.
Exactly.
So that's why integrating these into the CIP projects is really important as next steps. What
maybe creatively integrate, like.
Yeah, I might take step 2, and I might say that what you're doing over the right, where you're assigning funding, is look for creative funding avenues that keep it out of the regular CIP budget, or it's in the CIP budget, but funded in part by or wholly by.
Well, and then there's smart scale. There's just
smart scale.
Yeah.
What's
so
smart scale?
That's a VDOT funding that you apply for. It's competitive, but it has 5 different categories of for scoring that talk about congestion. It talks about economic development. There are categories that aren't necessarily just transportation.
It's kind of like a CDBG grant for infrastructure. Is that a basic oversimplification?
Yeah. No. I mean, so like the Canal Plaza improvements, so getting pedestrians to be able to cross those streets is a smart scale.
Right.
Lee Street, doing a road diet on Lee Street and putting bike lanes and stuff is a smart scale project.
Great. Okay. So back to the equity gaps though on this, connecting areas and green spaces in order to promote walkability. What are the major equity gaps that this strategy could address?
Well, there are definitely areas of lower income areas that aren't connected. I mean, there's, and just.
I think quality of green space in lower.
And it's those that are more dependent on other modes where it probably lacks the most. Yeah, like there was an article recently about transit amenities. I forget what the stats were. Not that that's connected green spaces, but.
Okay, so how can we equitably prioritize this rollout then, considering those elements we just talked about?
I think you can use income and other demographic indicators. I think there's usually a correlation of high income, high investment in your transportation services. I think that needs to be inverted to do this equitably.
Yeah, the one thing we're starting to look at is health statistics.
That's a good one too.
That there's a higher, studies show that there are higher incidences of heart disease or diabetes and stuff in communities where they're lacking this infrastructure.
And I think once again, this relates back to the first one, Diane, and you said that was really good, is to overlay safety statistics. Not only do you need to, we can overlay till the cows come home, and then we'll act based on whatever the heck we want to do. But if we can create some kind of a funding formula that's based on health, on safety, on demographic information.
Sure. Just like the Smart Scale has its own categories. The city could develop its own prioritization categories.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think we can, we did the analysis and we're going to act against all of the overlays that we did is something, not that, I think sometimes we try to show that we did the work, but that doesn't result in the right placement of our dollars.
Yep. There's probably something about asking too, asking the community.
Mm-hmm. And this is one that I think would be good. They're starting to pilot, and for some things I don't like it. I think this is one that would be good, participatory budgeting process. Because you can allocate money by council district or whatever it is for improvements, and that council district can decide what their most pressing needs are as far as micromobility and connectivity.
And in particular, if that's the case, it would be great to have the categories of judgment, instead of saying, what you don't want is the neighborhood that speaks the loudest necessarily, but if I think still could be a way of, since there's so many gaps, if there's a way to help prioritize them by giving guidance on what's important or what they might think is important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I love what y'all are saying, but all I've heard is include community in selection of locations. Were you talking about city council or representatives? Do we have some kind of transit associations or certainly we identified the civic associations, RHA, but how do we really get at, like you said, about asking them?
Yeah.
And not
and
just speak loudest.
I'm trying to see if I can find. There's a thing on VPM about it, where we're starting to have pilot programs to set aside some of our budget money, where it's a sub group in each district that decides where that money gets spent. So the money would be allocated, and then it puts it on a, in government, you always want to handle things at the lowest level possible as far as organization. So that would put it in a smaller area of decision makers who know the fifth, know the second, know where the money should be spent. I don't know if there's other groups besides neighborhood and civic associations.
I think that's great. Any other implementation partners? We got a lot on the first subcomponent. Green spaces. We got Parks and Rec.
Yeah, VDOT probably is a role here because some of the funding comes through them. I don't know where they go.
Okay.
And Sandra points out a really good one that we need to prioritize that roll out towards challenge residents, folks who are homeless, et cetera, to buy in. Because a lot of those spaces, the corners, the sidewalks can be considered territorial. That's a really good point. So we would need to like have them engaged as ambassadors of the space, she says, which Sandra, big ups for helping out through the text, because that's something.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to cut and paste because I can't.
Yeah, if you look in the chat.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you can just cut and paste, drop that in, and that's a really good. Yeah. That's the point. That is it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Did I put that in the right place?
What is Plan RVA? What does it fall? Is that a community organization? I don't know how much they are. They should be in here. They're on the committee, so they should be in here.
Yeah, Plan RVA is it's not Crater District. It's like an MSA level.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But I mean, this is micro, right?
Yeah. Anyway, never hurts to listen more.
Yeah.
Any other partners or funding ideas?
I think for city department, I think for city departments, it's the exact same, but you'd have to include budget in there because of once we talk about putting it into the CIP budget, Public Works would put everything in the CIP budget, but it really comes down to Jason May and his team as to figuring out matching priorities to money.
Yeah.
And then they'll come to me and they'll be like, can we just have $3 million more? Like, no, you can't, guys. I'm sorry.
You can just change that debt capacity.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's move on to strategy 3. We have municipal fleet electrification. So electrify Richmond's fleet of vehicles and equipment in alignment with the Clean and Green Fleet Report. So this has a bunch of subcomponents. Develop a plan, implement the recommendations, require all new vehicle and equipment purchases to evaluate electric options that incorporate full life cycle costing, including the social cost of carbon and budget forecasting, incorporate alternative fuel vehicles in the city fleet when electric vehicle options are not viable, and support the local economy through local biofuel, negative carbon opportunities, generate workforce development, and identify climate resilience and redundancy measures. So if we really we can do this. The office can take a lot of that and identify the next steps. So much has been wrapped up into this. But in addition to what you see here, maybe we need to talk about readiness. So municipal fleet electrification plan is ongoing. That's in the works. Implementing the recommendations requires city action. Require all new vehicle purchases. This is it's ongoing and it's going to require some city action. Incorporate.
I think we do it where we can, but it's not dictated that we must, correct?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and say policy being updated. And incorporate alternative fuel vehicles in the city fleet when electric vehicle options are not viable. That's ongoing. And then support the local economy through local biofuel. That is, I would say that's ready to go, but it's not being done.
The note about e-bikes is odd too, because that's not.
Yeah, this one, what happened was there were a lot of people who had a lot of ideas and we didn't want to lose any of them. So they just kind of got rolled up in here, But if we could go back to next steps.
So do the fleet facilities have the equipment to maintain electric vehicles?
That was one of the challenges that we listed last time, that there would be, you would need to retrain or hire differently, exactly, because that's a different skill set.
Yeah. But the physical fleet facility can handle the new vehicles of this type. Are there modifications? You would have to think there's some modifications. I don't know if they would, even power stations inside the.
I would think that the structure itself, yes, but the operations, like, okay, we're gonna build a bay that does electric vehicles. Then the idea is that more and more bays become electric service, but yeah.
Right. And I don't know what that exactly means. It may just be a charger.
Yeah, you need a gap analysis for maintenance.
Yeah.
Great idea.
But these are kind of steps in themselves where develop a plan and implement the plan. So
Yep, I agree. Do you, so unless we want to walk through the, let's see, I think you're right. Most of them are steps. What are some equity gaps that we might want to think about when it comes to municipal fleet electrification? I think there's workforce development stuff.
yeah.
So maybe develop like apprenticeships or
With community college partners, can there be electric vehicle mechanic, or is there one already that we can leverage?
Yeah, you would think there must be.
Right.
Somebody has to be teaching it.
this is where we really need Mr. Bullock to
All reaching here.
expertise. But I have seen there are some plaques on the wall at Fleet with, we have at least a couple of electric vehicle technicians.
Mm-hmm. But we want those to be jobs that we can give to folks in local underserved communities, that we can have okay, out of high school, there's a roadmap to city employment by getting a certification. You know what I mean? Instead of going out and hiring somebody.
And I don't know what the Richmond Tech Center does enough. I don't know what their programs are. Because they're looking at building a new facility, right?
You mean like the magnet school concept?
It's the one that's over there off of Westwood right now. At 195. I think, I mean, it is an alternative school, I guess.
Mhm.
I don't know enough about education to know how to purely define it, but I think they offer education to students who's are not college bound, but are looking to do trades. So it could be a new trade that they.
And for example, there's a certified electric vehicle technician training program from the Clean Tech Institute.
Yeah.
Location, NASA Ames Research Center. Okay. But there are certainly similar certifications and programs that could be emulated to grow our own future workforce in an equitable way.
I like that. Okay. Anything else?
Are we doing next steps for each section, or are we moving across?
Well, if you have suggestions, go for it. I'm thinking that those subcomponents are kind of next
Right.
steps, but I don't want to take up your time if you don't have any thoughts.
I'm with you on that.
I think this was a hard one because it's so programmatic, you know, but I do think, I'm not sure what implementation partners there are. Certainly Virginia Clean Cities.
So the Richmond Tech Center has auto body technology, automotive technology, motorsports technology, and welding under their transportation and manufacturing services career path.
Great, thank you. All right, well, that's a good one. I think this full life cycle costing is really important. So this is procurement and fleet.
And did you see Sam just put in a chat?
High schools.
Yeah, I think that's what the tech center is intended for, is that each high school doesn't have to have those.
But they could certainly partners.
Yeah, if the tech center is a public schools facility.
Right, and that when I say magnet, I mean that to what Sandra's point is, if there were high schoolers at any of our high schools who potentially had an interest in this as a career, okay, cool. Well, let's get you to the tech center.
Yeah. So there could be, I'm sorry, I just made me think there could be a private sector partner too, right? That partners with these, that helps to provide those apprenticeships in the community. Doesn't have to just be in our, I mean, you want to hire, you're having, the intent is to get people trained to do that kind of work.
CarMax.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of them. I would. You could come
but
up.
They're a locally based one that I think would have interest in that potentially. Oh, sorry, I'm the doorman today. I'll be right back.
So right now there is a Fleet of the Future policy that's being updated for vehicle replacement. So I'm gonna say integrate Fleet of the Future discussion and vehicle replacement policy update.
This may not have anything really to do with this because it's about electrification, but with what's happened during the pandemic and the use of technology, are there reduction in fleet because inspectors can do it via video, or are there practices that can be modified such that you don't have to go out in vehicles as much?
Yes, and I think that's part of the Fleet of the Future discussion, is that they're really looking at usage, and we're not going to need as many vehicles as we've had. So making sure that that's just like equity is part of every conversation. We need to make sure that we're not just acquiring electric vehicles because we got a good deal. Like, you know, what is the vehicle usage? So on the for needs assessment.
And you can also assess vehicle usage on trip generation. When I worked for Fairfax County back when it was when they were first getting electric vehicles, you had to have a business cause to put miles on an electric vehicle. So if you were going somewhere and parking, they wouldn't give you the electric vehicle because you weren't putting miles up on it and taking advantage of the efficiency. But for what our jobs were to drive literally up and down neighborhoods for real estate assessment purposes. So we were putting a lot of miles per day on a vehicle. And that's where they want you to use an EV versus if you just need to go to a meeting in the next county over. No, you can use a traditional fuel source vehicle.
Okay.
So it's the trip type.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's hard. We've been trying to think about that and work with other departments on how do we prioritize the rollout.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now this part about full life cycle costing and the social cost of carbon and budget forecasting. Jeff?
Well, who you really want to talk to is your energy manager position who we're going to hire. You know what I mean? I think there's definitely a tie in there. But that also gets us back to some of those overlays that Diane was talking about. Some of those medical overlays, as far as asthma, as far as you know, different conditions of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the question is, you wouldn't do that for every vehicle. I mean, one vehicle type, like a passenger vehicle, it's going to be the same. I mean, except for the cost of the vehicle, the analysis is the same, right? Pretty much.
The only question per vehicle is how many miles is this vehicle going to be driven, and you pop that in. And it's my example earlier. If it's okay, this is going to be running deposit box stuff 5 miles there and back a day.
Yeah.
Not going to have a big impact. But if it's give me another example that's high usage.
Yeah.
That's the vehicle we want to electrify.
The garbage truck.
Well, those are alternative fuel at the moment, right? Or do we have EV?
We have some diesel, and we tried to do a grant, but we couldn't match it, or we were going to get 75% back, but we had to upfront the purchase, and we couldn't do it. So what do you think about funding and financing? I mean, certainly there are grants.
The challenge of this to me from a financing perspective is A, the current cost of vehicles. Like we have a bunch of complaints because Blue Book values have gone up for every vehicle because of limitations in the production supply.
Yep.
And if you're telling me that USPS is going to be electrifying and private industry is electrifying and everybody's electrifying, that is going to drive prices up.
Well, that's where I said my question earlier was, is the market ready?
Yeah.
I don't know that the market is ready yet.
The market is hungry, but there's only so many lithium production sites, etc.
Well, yeah, the chips are demand. I don't know. I don't know what all the problems are, but at the moment. But that should, I mean, hopefully that's a blip and not a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all really good stuff. I think this climate resiliency measure alternative fuels. I think we're pretty good here, unless you have any other thoughts. All right, we have 10 minutes left for this fourth strategy: climate resilient infrastructure. Develop a climate resiliency plan for all transportation infrastructure that prioritizes projects using Envision and the Climate Equity Index. So there are 3 subcomponents. The first one is to fund a climate resiliency plan for transportation infrastructure, and using the equity index to prioritize budget requests for resilient maintenance. The second is adopt an ordinance to require the city to use the Envision framework for all new projects. And then the third is require that all new infrastructure projects are sited to avoid or minimize impacts to natural resilience features such as wetlands, forests, and vegetated riparian buffers. So readiness.
I have a blind spot. Can someone walk me through Envision?
Sure. It's a LEED-like program. Do you know LEED for buildings?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same, but it's for infrastructure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so on this first one, develop, implement, and fund a climate resiliency plan. Is that ready to go, or does it require city action?
I have not heard that it's ready to go. I assume that somebody needs to fund to do that.
So let me just say, ready to go does not mean that the funding's available. It's just that it doesn't require city action. It hasn't
Right.
started yet.
So city action doesn't include budgeting for it.
No, I think that's more of like a policy change.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. Well, then,
So it can be ready to go in the form of a report or a step of actions, but without pairing it to funding. Great, that's
it's going to be still ready to go.
right. Right.
A climate resiliency plan.
Is anybody even talking about it by you guys?
Well, Richmond 300 has language,
Yeah.
but as you know, like you can have all kinds of good intentions and guidance, but if there's not a policy saying this is happening, with a checklist that's prioritizing budget requests.
Yep. I mean,
So-
the really good news is you're not Norfolk or Virginia Beach. You're not sinking and the sea's not rising.
Till the moon wobbles, but yes, yeah.
Not to say that there isn't a need for consideration of resiliency, but you're
Mhm.
not as dire as in some places are.
We have heat resiliency concerns more than anything, I would think, in our.
Yeah, you've got some flooding,
Mhm.
in neighborhoods and stuff that.
Well, I'm going to take from the impact mapping, a couple of outputs were identified. So those seem to be good next steps. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
How about this legislation? Do you know anything about it?
I do not.
It's for VDOT. I don't know that it passes on to you all because you maintain your own roads.
Right.
So could we look to it for guidance?
Certainly.
As a framework for a scoring or requirements, yeah.
Do you have any mapping on risk areas? And you could map that, right? Like you could flood zones or floodways or floodplains, excuse me.
Mhm.
There are probably other area types that could be mapped that would help to determine which projects require more consideration of resiliency methods than.
Mhm.
Okay, so excellent. And then I would say, what are the equity gaps that this would address? I think even though you identify the floodplains, we need to look at our climate equity index to look for those red line neighborhoods and the underserved communities and make sure that those get, prioritized.
Yeah.
There's a correlation, if not a historic causation there, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't mentioned the CSO. I saw that Stidell's asked for what, $860 million or something from the state.
It's also been required by EPA that we have a deadline by we need to have.
Yeah, no, get all that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that ought to somehow be mentioned in this area.
Because our runoff is a portion of our transportation surfaces. I like that. Yeah. Streets are effectively gutters.
So should I add that in here somewhere? Is that funding or part of the next steps?
Well, the only thing I thought about it in the equities section because many of those CSO areas are in areas of like Gillies Creek in Fulton. I mean, they're in areas that could use more support.
Mm-hmm.
Or CSO.
but it is defined by a consent decree, so you don't have a whole lot of limitation or flexibility.
What's CSO?
Combined sewer overflow.
Okay.
The reason I didn't go to the river last weekend.
Well, it looks like we have Objective 3 group joining us. We have a couple more minutes if you guys want to speak to any of these. We are on strategy number 4 about climate resilient infrastructure. And so city departments on developing and implementing a climate resiliency plan. Who would the
We didn't include DPU before, but you would include them this time for sure.
Okay.
With DPW and planning.
How about community organizations?
I think like RVA H2O would be one for certain. And once again, I think some of the neighborhood advocacy groups would be in there.
I think someone else is typing in there, so I'm going to put that here.
Yeah, I'm trying to do these so we can get them.
Thank you. Oh,
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. You can think of any other partners in terms of climate resiliency.
How about DEQ?
Who?
DEQ?
Oh, yes.
State, yeah.
How about equity partners on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. Neighborhood advocacy groups would probably be better stated as a equity partner.
Well, it looks like that column's missing here, so you can go ahead and put it here. Yeah, I'm thinking like Mothers Out Front or, different community organizations that really care about climate resilience.
Mm-hmm.
How about all the friends of the parks?
Right.
Okay.
I thought when you mentioned Gillies Creek, I know that they're pretty active.
Yeah, most of the areas have the Friends of Bryan Park, Friends of James River Parks.
Yeah.
Great. All right, I'll put those in. Funding and financing of a climate resiliency plan.
I think the when we talk about capital intensive versus programmatic intensive, this is definitely a programmatically intensive strategy.
Okay. So then these other two, adopt an ordinance to require the city to use the Envision framework. That's going to need city action.
Yeah.
And then require that all new infrastructure projects are cited to avoid minimize impacts. Diane, wouldn't you say that's ongoing?
I would. Yeah.
Is there anything we could do to make it better though, in terms of next steps?
I'm not sure. All the, chest bays, all mapped, the RMA, RVAs are mapped. I guess maybe, heat islands just came to mind. They're not a natural resource, but there are some things like that study that, I don't know who's doing that heat island study that Richmond's part of.
Yeah.
Right.
Science Museum of Virginia is part of it.
Science Museum.
Mm-hmm.
Them Rice River Centers.
VCU and Science Museum.
But yeah, there are the avoiding and minimizing impacts to natural resources is a given just by state law, and impacts on wetlands and permitting and stuff like that.
So I think the next step could be something about considering, additional checklist requirements or something.
Could be.
I don't know.
Infill development, you know, I mean, we don't have many buildable green fields in the
No.
city for this reason.
Yeah, that's true. And so there's a brownfields, so looking at brownfields for redevelopment is the. what it
Fulton
is.
Gas Works, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a little more than brown.
Yeah, what's in the soil? Who knows, you know?
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. I think the other groups are coming back. Not sure if Wendy's group is back yet, actually. It's like David's came back. So we're almost done with objective 1. Any other thoughts on the equity piece of this, though? Equity gaps for climate resilient infrastructure? It might be more of the same, but if you have any thoughts.
I think you want to consider that the more regulatory requirements you put on any of your procurements, the smaller and the more elite the pool of people who can fulfill those needs. So I think you have to have equity considerations in assisting SWAM businesses in getting certifications so that they can be posed to service contractors on those. Otherwise, it's going to be the big hitters of construction and development.
So in the 5 parks on South Side that Parks is taking the lead on, there's some sort of a group that's been working on or been trained to do some of that work. Do you know who that is?
Are you talking about like the what is it, Oak Grove Belmead School Park area?
No, there's the one at Lynn Haven. There's those 5 different parks that have been identified as helping to bridge the gap of having green space within 10 minutes of anybody walking with anybody. And then there was a group that I thought like community trained people to help like clear trails and.
Is that James River Association? No.
I'll look it up. Sorry.
All right. So thank you. This has been really helpful. Wendy, David, how did your groups do? Wendy, you're muted.
Sorry, it's really weird. When I exited my breakout room, it totally booted me out, and then it was making me like sign in like a new user to Teams. So anyway, so it's in a different format now. But no, I thought we did a good job. Our first strategy was very GRTC focused. So we luckily had Carrie in our group, and we made good progress on that one, and we almost finished. So we did a good job on our strategies, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. How about you, David?
Yeah, same. We were able to get through all of ours about private and commercial electrification. So had some good brain power, good conversations. So I thought it went really well.
Fantastic. All right. You guys are definitely the dream team. Appreciate everything you're giving us. And that we're sharing with each other. So our next meeting is Thursday, August 5th at 1 p.m. There's going to be a second meeting in August, and we've made so much progress today that we'll have to think about how to use your time most efficiently to get through what we need to accomplish next. So you'll be receiving more information and an invitation to come. Any other general reflections on where we are in the process or feedback that you'd like to share? All right, well, with that, there's a survey, the same anonymous survey that we put out every time is in the chat. Feel free to give us your comments, feedback. We're always trying to get better. We definitely want this to be worth your time. Just really grateful for your presence. There's also another survey that is going to come out from our community engagement coordinator, Kendra Norrell. David, did you want to introduce that?
Yeah, so that's something that Kendra is sending out, I believe, tomorrow, based on recommendations from some communications folks and some equity consultants that we've been working with, just to help prepare for the next round of engagement. and get a sense of people's capacity to connect with community members, get a sense of what they're thinking about in general. So it's really going to help. I know Kendra, she plans for the next few months moving forward. So appreciate everyone's responses in advance.
Great. Thanks, David. So that's it. If you have any updates you'd like to share with the group, the floor is yours, and I'm going to stick around if you want to ask me any questions one-on-one. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for your time.
I just want to say shout out to Sandra for sticking with us in the
Yes.
chat, even though she had technical issues. Thank you, Sandra, if you're still there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Sandra.
Jeff, did you get that link? Okay.